some animals tonight. Julie, do you have any notes?
I don't. I'm excited that that Billy's on with us with his new venture. The entrepreneur that I am, I'm very excited to hear about it, and I know a little bit about it, but I even want to dig in a little more. So it's going to be fun.
And it's been a while since we've had Billy on. I think maybe nearly a year. Is that possible?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I want to say probably from when for the event last year.
Oh, right. So that was June.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. And it was funny because when you said about an hour, I was like, exactly an hour, because then it's like time to like put the baby to sleep. And that's the clock I live by now. So I was like, yep, 8 p.m. is perfect.
Good. Routine.
I don't have a baby, but I have to put all my chickens and stuff in before dark.
Yeah,
Yes.
see, there you go. Same exact thing.
I think.
Totally relevant.
All right. Well, we're glad everyone joined us tonight. Let's get rolling with some questions then. Ellen's got one here. What do you think?
Already? That's cool.
Oh yeah, we've got a ton coming in. Ellen, what do you think about microbiome restoration therapy or poop/fecal transplants? Are there safety concerns? Could it be a way to heal chronic infections from allergies? We give our dog probiotics, omegas. She still has frequent infections. We want some way out of this loop that's not with the toxic drugs offered by vets. I also heard that pets' personalities can change after fecal transplants. I think this is maybe for you, Julie. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, it can be for both of us because
Sure.
Billy's, when it comes to the microbiome, he is steeped in fermentation. So yeah, we can both address that. I think from my perspective, there is many ways you can look at this. I know people that have had great success with it. I know people that have had adverse reactions from it. I really, in any case, I wholeheartedly feel that the sicker your dog is that you're going to do it, the more you have to prepare the body to have it done. If your dog is pretty healthy and you're doing it just as a sort of a support measure, but if your dog is really sick or quite sick or deals with a lot of stuff, then from my perspective, it's no different than any other transplant. So if you're transplanting a heart or a kidney, or you're doing stem cell surgeries, or you're doing whatever, there's a big reaction that happens with the body, and the body often goes through an initial stage of trying to reject it, because that's why it's called fecal transplant. So you just have to be prepared. For me, I always would want to make sure that my dog is in the best shape as I possibly can. And then you have to be careful, because the same when animals get, or people get transplants, or even animals, they put them on steroids to suppress the immune system, because the stronger the immune system is during the transplant and right after, then the body's even stronger. The rejection process can even be stronger. So prior to it, you wouldn't want to be doing anything like echinacea or immune stimulants. You'd want to be really sort of baseline using, just mostly foods, and be careful that you're not boosting their immune system too much. And definitely they can have personality. I mean, stool, we're learning more and more, has all kinds of genetic mechanisms and makeup of the donor. So I have seen, people, or heard people say that their animals changed their personalities quite drastically after. Does it happen all the time? I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, that's my point of view. For me, as everybody knows, I tend to go a little on the other side, where I take a species specific feces, so canine feces, but then we ferment it and we isolate it and we turn it into a bacterial probiotic. That way you're decreasing the concern of having a reaction and you don't have to worry about any kind of like personality changes, and it's easier for the animal to respond to it in a natural way and take what they need and kind of leave the rest. But fecal transplants can be amazing. But what do you think, Billy?
Yeah, well, the part that really interests me in that question most, I think, is the idea of the personality changing. It's not, I think most of that is kind of extrapolated from human nutrition, because that's where really the research is being done in terms of, people getting, a different microbiome makeup versus uh, ADD and ADHD and depression and some things that are clearing up, and you're getting some personality changes. It's not as if I think it's sort of framed in the way that you would have the personality of the dog that you took that from, but those bacteria don't necessarily, react in the same way. But I saw something very interesting recently in humans that there was a small study done. I can't remember exactly where it was done, but they were talking about people on the autism spectrum and them actually having less bacteria that communicate with the brain typically. So that shows me they're obviously more than, more of what we know already in that area of science where sort of people understand this connection. Like, I have a lot of anxiety and therefore I have a stomach ache, but now they're understanding, this connection. So yeah, and I think it goes both ways, but I just think, whichever way you want to go about helping your dog's microbiome, whether it be through a probiotic supplement, whether it be through, fermented foods, whether it be through eating dirt, whether it's through, for instance, adding something like green juju to increase, the variety of plants to, feed those microbiome species, whether it's through all these things, in any one of those cases, the stronger bacteria are going to win in that, because they're all going to be competing against each other. So the stronger bacteria are going to win. So that's something you could definitely try. But I think it really just depends on what works for your dog, just in general. So there's a lot of different, therapies to go about.
Yeah, and your own philosophies and what feels right for you, and I think that needs to be translated into what you're going to do with your dog. I know, like, they've isolated specific bacteria with Alzheimer's, right?
Mhm.
There's so many things that we're taking and we're isolating from. So it's yeah, I mean, the concept of it being dog to dog for me makes sense. I mean, that's why we did Phytophthora, right? Because it's dog feces as a species appropriate probiotic. And we're going to be going one step farther soon, in that wheelhouse and in that realm. But I agree. Everything, I think, always, like, even diversity, right? Like, we don't know how much diversity comes from that. So the more diversity you can do with food and dirt and all of that stuff is a good idea. Saying that, can you tell us a little bit about what green juju is?
Yes, and actually I have a plan for everyone watching this video that wants to help their dog's microbiome that involves the both of us. So you can get a wonderful probiotic from Adored Beast, and you can pair that with our bison bone broth and one of our vegetable blends to be able to diversify those plants and feed that microbiome and those probiotics you're using. And that would be an awesome way to start that, which we've discussed in the past.
Mhm.
So Green Juju was developed by my boss, Kelly Marion, who
Billy, can you hear that noise?
I don't think so, no.
Weird noise.
Touching your zipper of your sweater,
Oh,
possibly.
okay. I will, I'll do this. That's totally fine. I'll just look awkward for the rest of the thing, which is great, which fits my personality really well anyway. So don't even worry about it. So Green Juju was founded by my boss, Kelly Marion, who basically didn't mean to start a company. She wanted to help her dog, and she couldn't find any products at the time that was what she was looking for, which was real food. And in order to do that, so we developed our initial green blend, which we have right now. We have 2 blends, all of which, are dark leafy greens, are plants that are going to bring fiber and antioxidants and, specific colors and and to the actual diet itself. So that was kind of the flagship product. But the really cool thing that we do is we actually don't just grind them up. We actually juice them and then add the pulp back, which leads to greater digestibility. So it's sort of breaking it down very similarly to, say, you know, the stomach contents of an animal. And then we also add bone broth and coconut oil for digestive purposes to that. And then recently, you know, we did add a bison bone broth, which is 100% grass-fed finished bison, and also 4 varieties of freeze-dried treats that actually correspond with a color. So
Oh,
yeah, so it's for instance beef, red, and bison green. So each one of those has plants that correspond to that antioxidant color. So as you can see, we are a plant-based company for the most part, which is a really cool. One of the reasons I picked it was because we can affect the diets of so many animals, because you can sort of, we focus on adding to diets. So whether you're a kibble feeder, you know, whether you are, you know, like me, someone who's, you know, fermenting their own dog's food at home, all of these things become, you know, applicable to that. And I will tell you too, for everybody watching, we do have some really cool stuff coming out soon, actually this fall. And then in the spring, we're working on some stuff as well. So I think all that stuff is going to be really awesome. And obviously for me, coming from, you know, fermentation and bacteria, we're obviously going to incorporate some of that stuff too, which I'd be very excited. So just super happy to be on board supporting, you know, her vision as to what we should be doing. So.
and I find that really exciting because it's really hard for, you know, it's hard for some people to like get raw food. It's hard for people to find a raw food that, you know, ticks off all the boxes, or to be able to rotate or whatever. So the fact that that people can get that and add it is amazing. I think it's amazing. Like, I think it's a really, really good idea, and it's gonna help a lot of people navigate through stuff, right? So if people were to use it, like let's say someone wanted to try raw, but they're kind of scared or
Mhm.
whatever, or they're, you know, they're still sitting on the fence. Um, they could use that sort of as a stepping stone, maybe to, like, to put onto their dry food and then see how their animal responds, and then maybe go into, is that a possibility?
Yeah, exactly. And that's who we really want to, like, obviously, you know, we want to make things for, you know, the people, you know, my bread and butter, and the people who, you know, are those, as people call them, the 2.0 pet parents, and the ones that really want the nutrition nerd stuff. But our main focus really is to get the people who don't care about nutrition. So people who just want to do better for their dog or cat. And so that's what excites me. And so, you know, when you look at, for instance, one of the flagship things that we do is, you know, with the Purdue study that showed a reduction of cancer by adding dark leafy greens and red and orange and yellow vegetables by, you know, 90 and 70%. That's a huge, you know, when you make products that help, you know, better health outcomes, you can't guarantee success, but all we're trying to do is we're trying to get a better probability that we'll have a healthier animal, right? And that's why we add supplements. That's why we feed them the way we do. So to be able to just affect the probability that of a better health outcome that much, I think would be, you know, really cool. And so that's who I think our target audience is. But again, we are still going to make, you know, stuff that the nutrition nerds will be like, wow, I've never really thought about that, because that's what excites me, is to look at something different and to create something that's totally not been done before, and to sort of, you know, it goes into my dog's own diet. You know, if anyone follows me on Instagram and looks at the pictures I take of my dog's bowl, I try to do things for her that essentially have never been done before, which makes her my guinea pig to some degree. But she's a well-fed guinea pig, so she's sitting right over there. I would wake her up, but she looks very peaceful. And actually, I will say, just to celebrate, she will be 15 on August 17th. So she's
Ah,
has a birthday coming up as well.
oh, well, I mean, you have to start with something, right? Like, all my horses here, all my animals here, well, all my patients in my vet hospital were my, kind of, in a way you could call them guinea pigs, because I, you know, I started doing all my formulas on them so that I could try and find a different and better way.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're going to use it, it really, for me, it's a testament in your you know, your confidence of the product, right? Like all my animals are on all of my products. I take all of my products. You're feeding your dog all of, you know, what you're making and trying. So, you know, none of us are going to even remotely go there if we weren't really confident in what we were doing.
Yeah, and actually I had been, using green juju for many years,
Oh,
prior.
wow, really?
So yeah, I had already been actually, we tell the story a lot now, but I was inadvertently the first green juju customer ever, because me and Kelly actually both lived in Seattle, and at the time she went into a pet store to give a sample of it and said, like, just try this out, just don't sell it. So she stuck it in the freezer, the owner of the store, and then I came in, she left, and I happened to just walk in later, and I was like, oh, I'll take this, and they sold it to me when they weren't supposed to. So I was actually the very first green juju customer all those many years ago, and obviously we got connected through that. So for me, it was really cool to, when the opportunity came for me to, you know, I specifically wanted to work, with Kelly because of the things she was doing. So it's been really cool. And like I said, I think people will be excited about what we have coming up.
Oh yeah, but that's a nice story. I always love stuff like that. It's almost like that things are meant to be.
Yeah, exactly right.
Like coming around full circle almost.
There's another question here from Beth. She said, Billy, is there different green juju product recommendations for certain diseases or issues?
So we not, I guess, in particular, especially at this time, because, for instance, in the past, I've written disease protocols for certain things, but we really, don't have an entire diet to be able to do that. But I do think you can look at specific plants in certain, in our actual blends, if you're looking for those specific things. So like a good example, that'd be one of our blends, Bailey's blend, has broccoli in it. And so if you were looking for those sulfur compounds you had a cancer dog or something like that, that might be the way to go, in terms of doing that. So I think just it's generally supportive of a lot of health issues, especially too, because the blends themselves are 3% net carbs. So they're still on the low carb end of things. So if you're dealing with, a cancer dog, or you're dealing with, most dogs should just be on a low carb diet anyway. So I think that works. Oh, wait, here she is. Hang on. Whoa, Lua. She's trying to walk away from me.
She's like, no, let me go.
But I will grab her, even though I'm going to so here she is.
Oh, look how cute she is. God.
Right?
She's adorable.
What do you think? Huh? She's a polar bear now. She has an all white face, but I think she gets more beautiful by the day. That's me.
Oh, well, I like hearing that, because my hair is like this great. I haven't been able to go to the hairdresser, and it's like, okay, just bite the bullet, let it do what it needs to do. It's just like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. But, so
It looks great.
I agree with you. She looks even more beautiful than
So sorry, I lose all concentration when she appears. Yes.
Cute.
Can I ask another question here? Can we switch it up a bit?
Yep.
Suzanne has a question about her 6-year-old dog did the yeasty beast protocol for 5 weeks, beginning in February. Then she did the leaky gut protocol. She's seen significant improvements with her health, and she uses the yeasty beast 3 on her paws once in a while. She has seasonal allergies. A big problem I'm dealing with is the anal gland issues. She's been having them expressed approximately every 5 weeks. She's been on a raw diet for a year now. She gets Phytophthora daily. Do you have any suggestions or other products? I'm considering getting them surgically removed as I'm at a loss.
I'm just wondering what she's doing diet-wise with like bone, right? Like bone and fiber in her diet. Because
that's a good question.
Yeah.
See if I can give her the mic here.
Because like, in the wild, the anal glands are used to track and mark territories and boundaries and things like that. And if anybody's having a problem with anal glands and their dog is having like really formed little solid poops or whatever, you want to try and get their stool to have literally bumps in them, or almost like little calcium deposits of bone. So in that bone, what happens is when they defecate, that bone massages the anal gland from the inside and helps them excrete the anal material. So I'm just wondering what she's doing as far as fiber and bone. And if the dog is, like, in my experience at the clinic, if your animal's not allergic to soft boned animals, like birds, neck bones are I find one of the best things to use to create these little sort of pebble or calcium chalky type of poops that will actually push on the anal gland. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Definitely. Billy, do you have
Yeah.
anything to add?
Yeah, I would just look at the fiber situation there, because you could, whatever you use to increase it. I mean, or obviously fiber can go both ways. So sometimes it's just about experimenting and being able to find out what's right for your animal. But also too, how old did she say the dog was? Did she say?
6 years.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, if you were dealing with if you had to do a yeast, a yeast protocol because you were dealing with a significant health issue, this could just be the aftermath of that. And if you were dealing with the problem for, several years before this, I mean, it could just be that it's going to be something that is an issue while the body sort of like heals or whatever.
Did you say she did leaky gut or no?
Yeah, she did yeasty beast, and then she moved on to leaky gut protocol.
Because the other thing that can happen is when the anal glands are squeezed a lot, they can actually, that sphincter can get scarred. So if anybody has been a little harsh on squeezing the anal gland, then the gland literally has a sphincter, has a little hole, right? A little escape. And if you're a little too rough on that, you can actually create it to scar, and then it almost becomes impossible for them to release them. So I would suggest, like, if you've already done it, there are some, I mean, I don't like that people do this with my products, but there is something in the leaky gut protocol that's the homeopathic remedy. And part of that remedy has something called thiocyaninium in it, which is mustard seed. And mustard seed is one of the best things to break down scar tissue. So it's one of the reasons why it's in the leaky gut protocol, because lots of times through ultrasounds that I've seen, when an animal has leaky gut, and this is why I created leaky gut protocol from the beginning, is that we want to heal the gut. We 100% want to heal the gut, but when the gut's traumatized and it heals, it often heals with scarring. And where that scarring happens, when the junctions actually reform together, that scarring can impede the digestion through the mucosal lining or the gut lining. So that remedy is to help decrease the amount of scar tissue that's going to form once the gut starts to heal. So that's part of the protocol with that in mind. So if she does have that, it wouldn't hurt to try and use that just the homeopathic part of that protocol to see if she can decrease that.
Awesome, Julie. Thanks. There's an interesting one here from April. Hi, Billy and Julie. With finding out that Raven can only tolerate mostly beaver as a protein, what would your suggestion be for a Kefir replacement, since beef, goat, or anything else isn't an option at this point?
That's a very interesting question. I would be I would be sort of remiss if I didn't say how we figured that out, because I would say it is possible, in regards to raw milk, to be, I guess, allergic to raw milk or to not tolerate it well. But I just want to remind people that a beef allergy has nothing to do with the milk that a cow produces, or even a chicken allergy to a chicken egg, right? Or something like that. These are different proteins.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I actually have, in my own living in Pennsylvania and having a wonderful food system here, I actually have access to raw water buffalo milk. So I
Oh,
do
yeah.
I do make kefir out of that. But that's not the average person, unfortunately. So yeah, I guess I would need to know a little bit more, but also too, if it's raw milk and it's fermented, so if you're taking it through that process, you could also, if you're making your own kefir at home, you could also ferment it longer. So the longer you ferment it, and you could do like a good, one of the things that I did a class I did a presentation for Dr. Juju Morgan, and I was talking about fermenting at home. And one of the things that you can actually see in the background here is a yogurt incubator to make kefir. And so if you actually if you're doing it at home and you're taking your milk and you're fermenting it in something like that, as opposed to just on your counter, because that you could hold it at 102 degrees for however long you wanted, you should get almost like a hydrolyzed effect there because you're pre-processing, those proteins. So I would try that. Or even if you're buying like a commercial raw kefir product or something, you could just leave it out at room temperature for a number of days and let those bacteria work and let the proteins, let those proteolytic cultures digest the proteins to some degree. So that would be my suggestion there.
Have you ever worked with coconut kefir?
Yeah, well, I actually use a product from the grocery store for like a raw coconut yogurt, as like that's one of Lua's favorite like treats, so I haven't specifically worked with it just because I'm so work with raw milk so much, but I do know that people get really sort of crazy probiotic counts in some of those products to be able to do that. But that would be the same thing. I've actually used a raw coconut yogurt to inoculate raw cow milk and have had a lot of success with that. It definitely takes a few ferments to be able to get the culture being consistent, but that would be a great thing to do as well. So one of the things that the product I'm specifically talking about is called Cocoa Yo. It's from a company called GT's.
Okay.
It's a plain coconut yogurt, and that is I actually just ordered some for Lua today. So that is a very applicable to dogs solution as well.
There's I don't know where this person is, but there's a company here in Canada called the Cultured Coconut.
I've definitely heard of that.
Yeah, and it's a kefir. Like
Mhm.
it's a
Yeah, that's a great point. I get so stuck in the mindset of raw milk that I didn't even think of that. So yeah, that would be a good way. I mean, it wouldn't have the same full health, nutrient profile, but you would still get the bacteria part if that's what you're looking for. So that's a great point.
And then the other thing that I wanted to just mention is that like being allergic to that many things or being food sensitive to that many things that you can only use beaver, that to me sort of really screams the gut's inability to retain the proteins within the gut lining, which is where they're supposed to go. So yes, you can eliminate proteins in order to support your dog through like an intense situation, but I would be personally looking a little bit deeper at healing their gut. I know I'm always talking about that, but I'm serious, because what's going to happen once they become sensitive to the beaver, right? Because then you're just going to be constantly running around trying to find more and more novel proteins.
And where do you even get that?
Beaver? I don't know.
in reality, where does the average person?
I read that and was like, holy beaver.
I think that the point you bring up is great, because I think it sort of brings up a bigger point about, for those of us who've worked with animals for so long, it's kind of like we live in a spot right now where dogs and cats are getting less healthy year in and year out. There shouldn't be a reason why, you get on a Q&A like this and you have, animals that are fed species appropriate diets, but are still having these health issues. It just shows you the genetic fallout from, you know, having a malnourished processed food, you know, dog give birth to a malnourished processed food dog, and you go down generationally. And that's why these things that we're talking about here, your, you know, adored beast and green juju, that's why these things are so important, because regardless of wherever you're at with diet, because no one's here to judge anyone on, you know, what they're feeding, whatever you're doing, it becomes that much more important to get a better health outcome, because that's why we're all here. We want as much time, we want as much quality life as we can with our dogs and cats. And so it just blows my mind that we live in a world where it's kind of like, you know, the average person is like, oh, my dog's really healthy. I mean, they kind of limp and they get hot spots and a couple ear infections, but besides that, they're good. And it's kind of like, we need to get in a place where we say, like, you know, this isn't natural, I guess, is the best way of looking at that.
No, we're all used to having like aches and pains and issues that we think are normal, that aren't normal. But when I say about beaver, like, it's like I get it, because I saw so many animals like 5 minutes away from euthanasia with skin disease, that you're desperate to find something to give them some kind of relief. And doing crazy novel proteins will do that. It will help mitigate the inflammatory process of the sensitivity, but don't lose sight that there's something deeper going on, and really try to address what is going on a deeper level than just you know, running around constantly trying to find novel proteins, as they're getting more and more allergic to everything as the days go by. So yeah, just try and be aware of going into a deeper level.
Yeah, well, and I totally just lost my train of thought. So that usually happens to me once or twice. So I had a great thing to
Baby
say.
sleep.
But yes, exactly. I'm sleep deprived. So actually, I can't throw Maple under the bus like that. She is an amazing sleeper. She ever since, so she actually just turned, you knew I was going to talk about her at some point. She actually just turned 3 months on August 1st. So, and ever since she came home, she sleeps from, I mean, you have to wake her up a few times to feed her, but we wake her up and she's slept from 8:30 p.m. till 9 a.m. So she is killing it. And so I can't complain in that. And plus,
not complain about that, that's for sure.
So yeah, it's but it's definitely an adjustment. So I'll blame that a little bit. So
okay. I was just every day.
Background again?
That is a yogurt incubator. It is that brand specifically, which is really great, is Luvel, Luevele, I believe. And it's really cool. It has it has temperature settings for, I believe, 97, 100, and 102, and it goes up to 24 hours. And I've had amazing ferments with it. So if anyone listening, if you want to do that, that's the best machine to get, in my opinion.
Yeah, someone asked in the chat there. Darlene has a question about her rescue pup, 5 years old, 30 pounds, positive for Ehrlichia.
Yeah.
And it's currently dormant, no symptoms. She has a sensitive tummy, even with rescue and foster. The rescue had her on kibble, which I continued. She had lots of gas, so I started the leaky gut protocol. We've been doing that for about 1 month. I still wasn't happy with the gas and the loose stools, so I switched her to a raw diet 2 weeks ago. No more gassy noises, poops are normal, yay. I just purchased the hemp oil and I'll start giving that to her. What else should I be doing? I want to do what I can to prevent or delay the chronic conditions that could arise from being positive for what I mentioned before. Please, if you have any advice.
Well, what I'm going to just say is also would maybe address Tanya. Is it Tanya?
Darlene.
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah, Darlene and Tanya.
Yeah, because anytime you're looking at a protozoa or anything like Lyme or tick-borne, illnesses of any way, shape, or form, anything in that family. The most important thing is their immune system, like keeping their immune system strong, and gut bacteria is really, really important in this, because I would tend to, like, there's a lot of people that are walking around that never get tested for Lyme, never get tested for animals, that never get tested for certain protozoas. We can't even diagnose half the stuff yet that's even out there, like viruses and tick-borne illnesses, things like that. Just it's, especially with global warming and stuff, it's going insane. So I think the most important thing is to get the body to a point where it can live symbiotically with anything, whether that's symbiotic with yeast, symbiotic with Demodex, symbiotic with all kinds of what we assume to be pathogens or something that's negative. The majority of people, I don't know if you would agree with this, in animals, Billy, we all have it, but our bodies are able to keep them in the symbiotic relationship. And when we start to get a little bit lazy about what we're eating, or we're stressed out to the max, or our bodies just get, or our animals' bodies aren't at their prime, that's when they can start overtaking stuff. So the most important thing is for me, is stress, diet, making sure that their bodies are have as much diverse bacteria as possible. But the other thing too, and Billy and I've had this discussion before, just about how interesting the mushroom aspects are for certain diseases, especially stuff like that. Because when you really think about what in homeopathy we call them the signature of the plant, or the signature of the remedy, when you think of mushrooms and you think how they grow, and you think that and you kind of look at them as a almost like they're not a parasite, but they almost act like a parasite. I mean, they're without mushrooms, we don't have a world. But the mushrooms don't have ability to feed on their own. They feed off of something else. So I always love looking at when things are similar. So if we're looking at any kind of parasite or protozoa or anything like that, they are a type of parasite that are feeding off of your dog's body, our body, whatever. So if you can match that up to something that would allow the body to work in a similar way, mushrooms are something that's really, really interesting to me when it comes to Lyme disease, and it comes to things like that work by staying in our bodies and invading our bodies and using our bodies to thrive. So I'd be looking at mushrooms, different kinds of mushrooms, chaga, like our chaga and turkey tail, or there's a million different kinds of medicinal mushrooms. I would definitely be looking at that and strengthening their immune systems as much as I possibly can. That's where you can use herbs and like greens, where they have really high amounts of work towards the oxidative stress of the cells, and really build the immune system. So you're not looking quite so, like, autoimmune diseases are different than protozoas, because protozoas and things like Lyme and stuff are definitely able to attack a body that has a lower immune system. Whereas so you want to boost the immune system. Whereas autoimmune disease, we have to be very careful with herbs and things like that, because you don't want to bring it up too high. You actually want it to have an immune modulation effect with things. But
Awesome. Keep that immunity going.
yeah. What do you think, Billy?
Well, I think too, and I'm guilty of this for sure. I think what we all have to focus on is also not changing too much too quickly, because I think a lot of us have the, you know, the sort of, especially when it comes to our dogs, you know, we tried this, but the dog had diarrhea. We tried this, but this didn't work. You know, we're so gung ho to fix things
We're
that
anxious.
we move off of things very quickly. So
Yep.
my advice to most people is feed food, because, you know, we don't understand the complexity of nature. Like, we don't understand everything about how chemicals interact that make up food. So feed food and give it time. So I think you're off to a really great start with what you're doing now. So give it some time. So, you know, I've had people reach out to me, you know, and have worked with, you know, people's nutrition in the past with their dogs, and they'll say, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, and this. What else can I do? And sometimes you just want to say, nothing, just do that. It sounds like that's working out really great. And I think that comes from just a general interest that people have, like, in nutrition. So what's the next thing I can do? And again, I totally relate to all this, because, you know, for me, that's how my brain churns constantly for that sort of thing. So if you're getting good results now, I would say that, but I would definitely integrate, you know, some of the you know, specifically your mushroom products, which are really great. But, you know, that's a great suggestion as well. But then that goes back to just food. So,
Well, it is food.
yeah, just try food. Always try food before you try medicine. That's a good rule of thumb, I think.
Yeah. And also try to be really conscious, as like, that's a really good point for anyone that's asking any questions, because I find that we get ourselves in such a state that we're not paying attention to subtle changes. So we don't think much is changing, or we aren't giving it time, but we also might not be looking at subtle changes, like, oh, they're jumping on the couch easier than they did before.
Mhm.
Or, oh wow, I haven't seen him curled up in a ball like that, sleeping so relaxed, or on his back sleeping so relaxed in a really long time. We're just looking at poop, we're just looking at skin, we're just looking at the specifics of what we're trying to fix, rather
Mhm.
than, is the energy in the deeper vital force of the dog or cat or horse or whatever getting stronger, because that's really when you want to wait and
That's
not
a
ship.
That's a great point. And it's those subtle things that only you're going to know best for your own animal.
Mhm.
So, you know, that's not something that, you know, an hour with a vet can figure out, because you know your animal better than anyone. So I mean, that's a great point.
We quite often recommend that people keep like a journal or a little diary near their supplements or whatever, near the food, wherever they're preparing things for the animal, and they can note stuff like that you both just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple questions here about senior animals and how to support them. One has hind leg issues, another one's getting older, and Geneva's wondering what her heat cycles are going to look like. Can you talk about supporting our senior animals and maybe one or two tips that they need?
Yeah, absolutely. As my senior animal walks by me again. So, I absolutely just love senior dogs. I think they're, you know, once they hit a certain age, you're like, how are you any cuter than you were before? But for the back hind legs, I mean, for my own specific dog, I have had a ton of success with large amounts of bone broth. So when you look at something like bone broth, you have all of those things that people look at for building joints, you know, that collagen, the glucosamine, the chondroitin, all of those acids that contribute to joints in their natural state. They're actually in a very, you know, suspended in moisture environment. So they're going to be much more applicable to, you know, being absorbed by the body. So a good example of that was about 5 years ago. For my own dog, I noticed she had tremoring back legs. And so that, what I developed for her, which was actually developed into, you know, a whole protocol for senior dogs, was doubling up on her bone broth. And I was able to, you know, to fix that. And so I would recommend, and plus just for moisture generally, when nature makes food, you know, for instance, in raw milk or eggs, it puts it in a ton of moisture, even more than a dog would get normally. So being able to contribute a lot of moisture to those nutrients, because one of the things we forget about with senior dogs and cats, and you see it all the time in senior dogs. What does their nose look like? It's completely dried out. And a lot of that is because, you know, they're not getting enough moisture. And so for me, the more moisture you can give to an animal like that, the better, you know, it's going to be for delivering those nutrients, because moisture is the delivery system of every nutrient. And people, I think, forget that water and inherent food moisture is the most important nutrient that the body can get. So highly recommend, if you're feeding a dry food, to incorporate, you know, things that have inherent moisture. You know, the obviously on our end, it would be the blends or the you know, bison bone broth. And then also, you know, finding what foods work functionally best that provide that extra sort of, you know, applied to literally every food. Like if you just Google like superfood, you can find an article on anything.
Everything.
But you know, those things like you were bringing up, like mushrooms, those things that are going to add that extra to an already, you know, balanced diet, that's going to contribute to that, I think. But I would say my number one is moisture, sort of, you know, on a deeper level, and then also bone broth for sure.
And I think that your point about moisture, that I would just like to add to this, is that when, like, the most natural way of an animal getting moisture in the wild with species oriented foods is blood, right? And blood digests differently, and food digests differently, and water content, moisture content goes kind of like where it's supposed to go when it's being digested in the way that food's digested, compared to a cat going and standing in front of a water bowl and drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking, or a dog going and drinking a ton of water. The way that the bioavailability and the way that they absorb their fluid when it's coming, I mean, they still need fresh water constantly, but the way in which they absorb their water when it comes through bone broth, so that it has a protein in it, when it comes through milk, when it comes through blood and serum, it has the ability to affect, in my opinion, the kidneys and the liver better. And those are the things that we have to really watch out for in senior animals, is supporting their kidneys and supporting their liver. So when you're giving them some of their diet through blood, milk, or bone broth, I believe that they're going to utilize that hydration way better than just water. So
Yeah.
it's a really important thing for not just joints, but for organs as well. And people are constantly saying to me, why don't we make a joint supplement, right? Like, why aren't we making a joint supplement with MSM and glucosamine and all that stuff? And because I feel like when you're looking at joints, you have to look at the whole muscular skeletal system. Like, you have to look at the ligaments and the bones and the periosteum and the lining of the bone, and like the circulation of the bone. And it's not just looking at the lubrication part of it. So, I mean, for me, jump for joints is a big one. And that's because I don't worry about MSM hurting their stomach. I don't worry about any kind of like contraindications or reactions that you can get with some joint supplements. And it's super energetic. So there's no side effects to it. And you can kind of use it as needed. You don't have to like build them up and then leave them up there. You can literally give it to them, see how long they need to have it until it starts to work, and then you can decrease it, and you can basically work with it without having any kind of concern that it's going to cause a side effect.
Exactly. Yeah. And shout out, by the way, to liver, your liver product for,
Liver tonic.
yeah, the liver tonic for my senior dog, who is actually coming up in September. She'll be going on her 2-month liver detox, which was very successful in March. So way to go on that. Side note.
Yeah. And just, I never ever cannot talk about, like, I was just talking to Isla Fishburne the other day, and actually today, right, stuff. And I was just saying, like, how Like when you talk about your dog, my heart, I feel my heart, because it's like when my mom was, just before my mom died, she's 93. And when I would look at my heart would hurt, because my mom was like the cutest possible thing on this planet. It almost made me feel like I was looking at a baby, right? Like this vulnerable, beautiful soul. And I feel the same with dogs and old animals. Like it's just, there's just something about it. So we also have to remember that we have to continue to stimulate them through, walking slower and letting them sniff more. And, maybe don't be on your cell phone when you're taking them for the walk, so that you can actually pay attention to what they want to do. It's
Mhm.
like we want them to do is, they're in their senior years, and it shifts, right? It shifts. And sometimes people don't do anything with their animals because they can't play frisbee with them anymore. It takes too long for them to go for a walk, because they walk at like, warp speed, like really
Yeah.
slow speeds or something. So it's really important to maintain that, whatever that is, keeping your senior dogs and cats happy, emotionally happy, and not bored, just sitting at home doing nothing.
Yeah, and it can be tough. I mean, I definitely know, after, the first part of having a baby, trying to find time to walk and stuff. But the other thing is, the great thing is, senior dogs just love to sit and hang out with you and just be, pressed against you, or just want you to pet them. And so, for me, I know I've been definitely relishing that aspect of it as well. So
Mhm.
my senior dog is the best dog in the world. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Gina said it's always bothered me when I see people tugging on their dog's leash instead of letting them sniff and enjoy the walk. And
Yeah.
Julie, you always compare it to letting them read the newspaper.
Hmm.
That's how they get their information.
Yep, it is that, and sniffing butts, which we also don't want them to do. So it's like, what do you want them to do? Sniff a pole or sniff a butt? So I think they should be able to do both, but I'm a little anal. I was gonna say both.
Okay, I've got one more. I don't know, it's the last 5 minutes here of our session, but there's a couple questions about allergies, environmental, seasonal. If you could do one thing to help your animal through allergy season, or to improve their allergy symptoms, what would it be?
Billy, I'm gonna let you talk about food or whatever you want to talk about with that.
yeah, that's great. For me, it's just about, how do I give them a better microbiome? How do I, because if you can increase their microbiome, it's going to help their immune system function better. I mean, a lot of people throw around the stat, it's like, I've seen 70 and 80%, of the immune system resides in the gut. And so all the things we sort of, to go full circle from the beginning of this, all the things that we talked about in the beginning with behavior and all those things, everything in the body is connected to everything else in the body. So you're also going to be able to do that. So working on the microbiome with, getting a diverse, environment of good bacteria, getting, that collagen to actually heal the lining of the gut, getting, the diversity of plants to feed that bacteria. Once you have all of those things, not only are you going to see your allergy symptoms get better, but you're going to see a whole host of other things get better as well. So for me, it just goes back to, how do I heal the gut, which is probably, the base root of the problem anyway. Because again, going back to what we were also talking about, dogs as a species shouldn't be allergic to everything. There's just no reason that they should actually not be able to function in the world, in a functional way. And so, just introduce foods that are going to help the microbiome, I think is going to have the best, health outcome when it comes to allergies.
Yeah. For me, I'm just gonna, because that part of the nutrition is covered for sure. For me, if there was like one thing to, if you just had one thing to do, I don't know what one thing would be to do. I mean, as far as products go, I think I would be looking at Phytophthora, because it's got, when Billy was talking about like the lining, fulvic and humic acid is soil. That's what it is. So it helps the integrity of the, and it's, you know, it's been researched to do so. It helps the integrity of the gut lining. But the really interesting thing about that probiotic, which is the dog strain, the canine fecal strain, is that we've got lots and lots of research how it is an immune modulation.
Mhm.
So if the immune system goes up, it actually brings it down. If it goes too low, it actually brings it up. And that doesn't surprise me, because you know it's the genetic mechanism of a dog. And what Billy just said is that this isn't normal for dogs to be so allergic. So it seems to have captured the way that a dog should be living in a healthy environment. So I'd be doing that. I also like to look at liver tonic, because if the liver's clean, the histamine levels are more regulated. So, you know, like using something like liver tonic to help support the liver. And then one last thing would be really careful of what happens and what you use as far as drugs go prior to the seasons that they get allergies. Like, are you vaccinating in that time frame? Are you using a ton of, you know, topical pesticides? Like, are you adding more to the body in certain periods of time of the year that you're not really aware of, that are then creating more hyperimmune response, like autoimmune response? So I would be really trying to decrease the amount of drugs that you're using, pesticides that you're using. Like Billy said, be conscious of the food that you're doing. And if you're looking at products, I would look at Phytophthora, and I would look at liver tonic.
Awesome. Awesome session. Really good insight for everyone. Thank you, Billy, for joining us, and thank you, Julie, for hosting.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm glad that we had this time to like talk about it, because I've learned more about what you're doing with Green Juju, and you know, I think you're brilliant, and always have, and I'm excited to get behind your new venture.
Well,
And
I appreciate that. And as you know, I've been on the Adored Beast train for a while. So
yeah,
ditto.
fun. Okay.
Excited for things to come. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.